Hi, my name is Molly Hunter, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to fix a drawer. I'm going to be repairing a drawer by putting two pieces of wood back together. I'm going to be using a hand drilling method, and I'm going to be using an electric drill with and without clamps for both. So no matter where you are, no matter what tools you have, no matter what your setup is, you should be able to use one of these methods. At bare minimum, you're going to need a screwdriver, the screws, and a hammer to do this. If you want to be a little bit more advanced, you could do this with an electric drill, but either way, I highly recommend that you use clamps. You can get a pair like this at most hardware stores for under $20. Before I forget, remember to stick around to the end of the video for a funny blooper from some B-roll that I was shooting of the drawer before it was repaired. First, you need to measure to place your screws. I'm pulling measurements from another drawer in my kitchen to make sure the pieces go together the way they're supposed to. Once that's done, mark your measurements on the pieces you'll be working with. In my case, I can place the screws pretty much anywhere within the area the two pieces of wood are touching. It's important to check, recheck, and triple check your measurements. I'm placing the two pieces together exactly how I want them and tracing the edge where they meet to make sure my screws won't be misplaced. Now I'll mark where I want my screws to hit on the larger piece of wood and measure and mark out exactly where those spots meet up on the other piece. Marking out your screw holes on both pieces of wood is especially important if you're not using clamps because you'll need to drill your pilot holes separately. If you don't, the holes on your pieces of wood will not line up. If you don't already have screws, you're going to need to buy some at a hardware store. Before you go, you'll need to have a rough idea of what size screw you need. Diameter isn't super important. The general rule is just that the bigger the project, the thicker the screw should be. However, if you are using an electric drill, you'll need to keep in mind that one of your drill bits will need to be a little bit thinner than whatever screw you end up buying. Make sure the screws you buy are long enough to get through both pieces of wood, but short enough they won't punch through the second piece of wood and become a hazard. Whether you're hand drilling or using an electric drill, you must make sure the head of your screws are compatible with your screwdriver or drill bit. I'll be using a Phillips head screwdriver, so my screws should have a cross divot on them. Next, you will want to start your holes. There are two ways of doing this. My preferred method is to use a hammer to lightly tap the screws into place where you've marked out the location of your drill holes. You could also accomplish this with a little hand drilling using your screwdriver. Don't drive them into the wood too far. A small divot is enough to keep the screw in the right place when you get started drilling. If you're not using clamps, start your holes on both pieces of wood you're going to drill into, the one the screw will enter and the one it will punch into and end in. If you are using clamps, you only need to start your screw on the piece of wood the screw will be entering. If you're hand drilling without using clamps, you will need to now line up your screw in the correct place and fit your screwdriver into its head. Pushing down on the screw to drive it into the wood, turn the screwdriver clockwise. This may take a while, and you need to be careful to maintain your grip, pressure, and angle to keep the hole straight. Once you've drilled all the way through your first piece of wood, carefully unscrew the screw, twisting counterclockwise while making sure to keep it straight coming out of the hole. Now repeat this process on the other piece of wood you will be attaching to the first one. This time, though, make sure not to drill all the way through. Then carefully unscrew the screw, twisting counterclockwise. Finally, line up the two pieces of wood so their holes match up. Use your screwdriver to insert your screws for the last time. Screw clockwise again, going through both pieces of wood until the head of the screw is flush against the first piece of wood. On the last couple of turns, you may meet with a little resistance. That's okay. Go until the screw is flush and no further, otherwise you risk stripping the screw. If you're using C-clamps, you can do this all in one go, screwing all the way through the first piece of wood into the second. If you're using an electric drill, you may want to drill pilot holes for your screws. Select a boring drill bit slightly thinner than the screw you will be using. If you're not using clamps, you'll need to drill your pilot holes separately. On each piece of wood, line up the drill in the correct spot and increase pressure on the trigger while bearing down on the drill to penetrate the wood. Try to work quickly. Unless you have very steady hands, your hole is likely to go crooked. Drill completely through the first piece of wood, but be careful not to drill the second piece of wood deeper than your screw will penetrate. If you're using clamps and your drill bit is long enough, you can drill your pilot holes through both pieces of wood in one go. Line the pieces up, clamp them together, and drill through the first piece of wood into the second. Once again, make sure not to drill all the way through the second piece of wood. Once your pilot holes are drilled, switch out your boring drill bit for a drill bit that's compatible with the heads of your screws. In my case, that's a Phillips head screwdriver bit. Next, align your pieces of wood so the holes match up. If you're using clamps, clamp everything in place. Then, line up the screw with the pilot hole and insert the drill bit into the head of the screw. Make sure to get your hands clear of the screw before you start drilling. Then, drill the screw into the wood until the head is flush against the wood.